What if life is actually common throughout the universe? What if the roots of all life on the planet Earth that you call home is actually out in the stars? Today we're going to talk about panspermia. Let's get into it. Hey universe, this is Joseph Aladriel from the Cosmic Embassy, and in this episode I'm so excited to talk to you about panspermia, a theory that has been around for quite some time and is still supported by some very well-known scientists today. Now I'm going to take you through kind of the origins of it, the basic theories really quick, and kind of make a case for why you should be understanding what panspermia is. I'm going to look through some articles and I'll leave a link in the description to all of them so you can research for yourself, and I do encourage you to. Alright, so to start off, the first one we'll skim through real quick is from thoughtco.com, and it's just talking about kind of the origins. It was first mentioned by a Greek philosopher around 500 BC. It wasn't until the late 1800s when the theory really started to pick up steam. Several scientists, including Lord Kelvin, which is where all the temperature rating came from, implied that life came to Earth on stones from another world, which began life on Earth. Now here's the big part. In 1973, Leslie Orgel and Nobel Prize winner Francis Crick, who actually developed DNA, or who found it, I believe, published the idea of direct panspermia, meaning an advanced life form sent life to Earth to fulfill a purpose. And we'll get more into that here in a second, but basically the theory is still supported today. Panspermia is still supported by several influential scientists, such as Stephen Hawkins. All right, so just to describe the basic kinds of panspermia, first one is lithos panspermia, which is interstellar panspermia, which is basically impact expelled rocks from a planet's surface serve as a transfer vehicle for spreading biological material from one solar system to another. So a meteor hits a planet and shoots it out of its solar system and eventually makes its way to Earth and starts life here. So that is lithopanspermia. Then we have ballistic panspermia, which is basically the same concept, except for instead of interstellar, it's a planet in our solar system. Usually they talk about Mars, and we'll find out here why here in a second. But basically ballistic panspermia is interplanetary panspermia. And the last one, the most interesting, is directed panspermia, which is the intentional spreading of seeds of life to another planet by an advanced extraterrestrial civilization, or the intentional spreading of the seeds of life from Earth to other planets by humans. Super interesting. Everyone pretty much agrees that life started about 4 to 3.5 billion years ago. And right before that time, there was this period where the Earth endured extended and very powerful series of meteor showers, and they call it the bombardment. The earliest evidence of life suggests it was present some 3.8 billion years ago. So basically what they're saying here, and it's kind of agreed upon, is that life started right around that time, 3.5 to 4 billion years ago. And right before that, there was this intense bombardment of meteors. Like we were just getting destroyed. But as we'll find out, potentially we were getting filled with all the building blocks of life right around that time. So I want to play this little clip right here.
Were all the prebiotic chemicals already here on Earth laid out like the ingredients to a biological cake? Or did these chemicals come from elsewhere? A tantalizing clue recently came from Europe's Rosetta mission that has been orbiting Comet 67P for the past 2 years. In addition to the incredible number of discoveries Rosetta's made, the detection of the amino acid glycine in the comet's coma, basically the dusty, gassy atmosphere surrounding the comet, has excited astrologists. This is the second comet known to be carrying the amino acid. In 2004, it was found on the comet Vil-2, which is exciting because we know that glycine is one of the essential building blocks for life, and we know that finding it in more than one place isn't a fluke. Not only that, but Rosetta's comet also contains other compounds that form the building blocks of life, including the element phosphorus that is the backbone of DNA and RNA. This basically reaffirms that comets sow the potential seeds for life on planetary bodies. So we have a pretty good...
So he's saying that we're finding the building blocks of life for comets, and we found it on more than one. And like he said, that's not a fluke, meaning if we found it on more than one, then it's potentially very common. So now we're starting to build this case that meteors have the building blocks of life. And some of them, like the one you just saw, have tons and tons of the necessary building blocks for life. So these things that are flying around in space and impacting planets, they're hitting planets, and some of them have the conditions for life. Life life sprouts up. And when I start to think about this, it becomes really, really obvious in my mind from this relatively scientific, logical, mainstream perspective that life is common throughout the universe. Because if it hits our planet, we're not the only planet getting hit. And guess what? We're not the only planet that has the conditions for life. So let's keep going. All right, and this is an article from the Telegraph, and this is all the way back from 2009. Fossilized remains have been found in the rock which was blasted out of Mars 16 million years ago as the solar system was forming. The meteorite called Allen Hills 84001 made headlines in 1996 after fossils were found in it. Scientists believe they were bacteria from Earth that contaminated the rock while it lay frozen, but a NASA report now says there's strong evidence they originate on Mars, according to The Sun. Super key. Dr. Emily Baldwin, deputy editor of UK's Astronomy Now magazine, said, quote, many scientists argued that what looked like fossils in the meteorite were really caused by the explosive event, such as an asteroid impact that blasted the rock out of Mars in the first place. But the NASA team is now saying they've proved that they could not have been produced by the blast itself, meaning it came from Mars. If the features turn out to have an extraterrestrial biological origin and were not formed during the 13,000 years the meteorite spent laying on the Earth in Antarctica, by the way, this will have profound implications for our understanding of how life evolved in the solar system. Professor Colin Pillinger of Open University, quote, this is a good quality work and more compelling evidence to add to the mix. These guys have been plugging away at this for years. It is a very careful study by very reputable people. So just wrap your mind around this for a second. They're saying that a piece of Mars hit Earth and there was tons of life and fossils in the meteorite. And it lay there for 13,000 years. So this is direct evidence that there was life on Mars. And that becomes really interesting. So the next thing we need to talk about is endoliths. Endoliths are an organism that lives inside rock. Many are extremophiles, living in places long imagined inhospitable to life. Super key. They are of particular interest to astrobiologists and us, who theorize the endolithic environments on Mars and other planets constitutes potential refugia for extraterrestrial microbial communities. So basically, endoliths are life forms that live deep inside of rocks. And the reason this is really important is because when you go out in space, there's all these really harsh conditions. There's the vacuum, it's super cold, there's all this cosmic radiation, and most of those things would kill most types of life forms. But if you have something like an endolith that's surviving deep inside a rock, and they are extremophiles anyway, they can survive in really intense conditions, then we have the potential for these things to survive a really long journey, maybe from another planet in our solar system, or maybe from another solar system, maybe even from another galaxy if you want to get really on the big scale. So endoliths. Next thing I want to bring in, super interesting. Check this out. Article from the Express. Science News. Octopuses came to Earth from space as frozen eggs millions of years ago. Octopuses are aliens which evolved on another planet before arriving on Earth hundreds of millions of years ago as cryopreserved eggs via a process known as Panspermia, radical new research suggests. The extraordinary claims were made in a report entitled Cause of the Cambrian Explosion. And if you aren't familiar, the Cambrian Explosion was this time, and this is agreed by pretty much everyone. The fossil records basically say that life was evolving kind of slowly, and then at a certain point, we don't really know exactly why, but at a certain point it just went bam, like all these possibilities exploded. There was way more life, and that's when our current world basically started to form and all the life in it. So they're saying the cause of the Cambrian explosion was it terrestrial or cosmic, which was co-authored by a group of 33 scientists and published in the Progress in Biophysics and Molecular Biology journal. The paper suggests that the explanation for the sudden flourishing of life during the Cambrian era, often referred to as the Cambrian explosion, lies in the stars as a result of the Earth being bombarded by clouds of organic molecules. So this is really key too, because most of the other theories are talking about just how, meteors could come containing life, but there's another aspect. Life can actually escape our atmosphere. Spores can leave, and if they can leave here, they can leave other planets, and we'll get into that in a second. But also there's these giant clouds of different particles and organisms, potentially freeze-dried bacteria out in space. Sometimes they interact with our solar system when we're moving around the universe. Super key to understand. But the scientists go on to make an even more extraordinary claim concerning octopuses, which seem to have evolved on Earth quite rapidly, something like 270 million years ago, 250 million years ago after the Cambrian explosion. 250 million years, after the Cambrian explosion. The paper states the genome of the octopus shows a staggering level of complexity with 33,000 protein coding genes more than is in the present Homo sapiens. So what they're basically saying is that octopus has evolved way faster than humans did, which doesn't really make sense. So the other possibility is that they actually had way more time to evolve than we have on another planet or in another environment, and then they came here already pretty evolved. Its large, quote, its large brain and sophisticated nervous system, camera-like eyes, flexible bodies, instantaneous camouflage via the ability to switch color and shape are just a few of the striking features that appear suddenly on the evolutionary scene. It wasn't anywhere else. Quote, the transformative genes leading from the consensus ancestral nautilus to the common cuttlefish to squid to the common are not easily to be found in any pre-existing life forms, meaning they don't know how it evolved that fast. If it is plausible then to suggest, they seem to be borrowed from a far distant future in terms of terrestrial evolution, or more realistically from the cosmos at large. One plausible explanation in our view is that the new genes are likely new extraterrestrial imports to Earth, most plausibly as an already coherent group of functioning genes within, say, crypto-preserved and matrix-protected fertilized eggs. Thus, the possibility of crypto-preserved squid and or octopus eggs arrived in an icy bolids, I don't know what that is, several hundred million years ago should not be discounted, as that would basically explain octopus' sudden emergence on Earth and how evolved they were. So tons more interesting stuff in this article. I'll leave the link in the description below. So squids are literally aliens. They are literally, yeah, and you always knew it. Every time you saw a squid, you're like, God, that looks like an alien. You were right. You were right the whole time. Good job. High five. Next one to bring in is the tardigrades. So a lot of you probably have seen this, many of you maybe have not. And the tardigrades are called water bears or moss piglets. And they're these tiny, tiny animals. They're really interesting. They are not insects. They are actually considered micro animals. And what's so interesting about tardigrades is they are able to survive in extreme environments, A, and B, they're all over the planet. You find them in some form or another at the bottom of an ocean, at the bottom of lakes. You find them at the top of a mountain. You find them in the desert. You find them on some moss in a rainforest. They survive and thrive mainly with water, but they have these crazy abilities where they can like shrink and like hibernate for like decades or like maybe hundreds or thousands of years. They can be totally freeze dried and come back to life. It's really, really mind blowing. And so the implications are massive from tardigrades. So just a quick list: temperature as low as 200 degrees Celsius and as high as 151 degrees Celsius. And we've actually seen beyond that. Freezing and or thawing process, they survive. Excuse me. Changes in salinity, so different salt, lack of oxygen, lack of water, levels of X-ray radiation, 100 times the lethal human dose, some noxious chemicals, boiling alcohol, low pressure of a vacuum, high pressure, up to 6 times the pressure of the deepest parts of the ocean, tardigrades can survive. So this is amazing from the perspective of potential extraterrestrial space travels. This could be an extraterrestrial. It's very likely tardigrades did not start here, and it's very likely they actually could have just rained down from the sky, and that's why we find them all over the place. And on a slightly other note, it has huge biotechnology implications because they're already trying to take and they're already successfully taking some of these aspects of the tardigrades and potentially mixing them with humans or different stuff like that in secret projects. So imagine like a human tardigrade hybrid, and we'll get into that in some other video. So tardigrades, the next part I want to put in here, the Loricifera. This isn't an extremophile or anything. I just put this in here while I was researching. I found this little creature, and man, if that doesn't look like an alien, I don't know what is. If I saw that, when I was out in space. It's kind of look like peas. Kind of looks like a pea pod right here. But you know, maybe they're really nice. Maybe that would be your best friend out in space. You never know. Got to keep your mind open, you know? All right, next part to put in here, and this is super, super key. Mushrooms. Mushrooms are likely extraterrestrial, and I'm not saying every type of mushroom we see here on the planet is from space, but the roots of many mushrooms, and maybe all mushrooms, is from space. And let me explain why. The main reason is because, let me just read this. This is a little part from Terence McKenna, actually. What the mushroom says about itself, this. That it's an extraterrestrial organism, that spores can survive the conditions of interstellar space, which has pretty much been proven. They are deep, deep purple. This is key. The color that they would have to be to absorb the deep ultraviolet end of the spectrum, meaning ultraviolet radiation, they can survive in deep space. The casing of a spore is one of the hardest organic substances known. The electron density approaches that of metal. So basically, and I could go on, I'm going to leave a link to this article because it's really, really good. But basically, spores can survive in space. They're the hardest known organic material known to man. And so it just leaves a really, really fascinating implications for panspermia, spores raining down from space. And we have people doing research that spores can actually, through the atmosphere and through the air, naturally permeate out of the planet. They can spread from planet to planet without any assistance. And then if you have people like us and maybe other extraterrestrials who are going up and down in ships, it just makes it easier for them. They can ride maybe the tailcoats, if you will. So the other part of this is, and I mentioned this in the very beginning, how the Panspermia Theory, in 1973, Francis Crick published the idea of direct panspermia. So let's get back to Francis Crick. He received the Nobel Prize for his discovery of the DNA molecule. This is the guy who discovered the DNA molecule. And his 1981 book, Life Itself, he fills the first half of the book with reasons why life could not originate on our planet. And then he proceeds to suggest that it came from outer space on rockets. Crick proposed that life began somewhere else in the universe and evolved to a much higher technical level than is now present on Earth. He next suggests that life forms are now sending rockets containing primitive life forms, perhaps bacteria and or blue-green algae, throughout the universe, spreading the seeds of life hither and yonder. Crick even describes the rocket's design and postulates the conditions necessary for successful re-entry into our atmosphere. Quote, in Life Itself, a noted co-author of Watson-Crick model for DNA structure embraces an origins view called directed panspermia, in which it assumes that life was originally sent to Earth from outer space. According to Crick, life evolved from non-life on some other planets, starting with the spontaneous generation of bacteria and proceeding all the way to highly intelligent beings. These gifted individuals, whom Crick says surprisingly little in the book, then sent our own bacteria ancestors here on an unmanned spacecraft. So really interesting theory. Not saying I agree with it, but I do know extraterrestrials are real, and I do know they had some part in the creation of the human species, and I do know panspermia is true. That's why I'm making this video. All right, so the last part I'll put in here is an excerpt from a paper published in Nature, which is one of the most well-known scientific journals, and it's called Can Spores Survive in Interstellar Space? There is good evidence that life appeared on Earth just 200 to 400 million years after the crust had cooled, assuming conventional methods of measuring age. 200 million years seems a bit on the short side for a spontaneous generation of life, although no one really knows just how long this process should take. The apparent rapidity of the onset of terrestrial life has led to the re-examination of the old panspermia hypothesis, in which spores, bacteria, or even non-living templates of life descended on the lifeless but fertile Earth from interstellar space. So they've now tested spores under temperature and ultraviolet radiation levels expected in interstellar space. This is super key. They found that 90% of the spores under the test would be killed in times on the order of 100 years, far too short for panspermia to work at an interstellar distance. But, however, if the spores are transported in dark molecular clouds or inside of a rock or in something like that, which are not uncommon between the stars, survival times of tens or hundreds of millions of years are indicated by experiments. Under such conditions, the interstellar transportation of life is possible. So we have all these different life forms that can survive in interstellar space. Granted, maybe at a low degree, maybe it's really hard to be out there, but if you have an infinite amount of life trying to get out there, over time, it's pretty much guaranteed life will eventually make it here. And here's the kicker, here's the key. If all this is true, or if even a fraction of everything I just covered is true, that means life is very likely many places all throughout the cosmos. Anyway, I hope you liked the video. That's all I got. Let me know down below, what do you think? Did life start out in space? Are we all extraterrestrials? Everyone you know, you love, all the animals you've ever seen have their roots in space. Are we all extraterrestrials living on Earth? Is Panspermia BS? Let me know what you think. I love you either way. Make sure to subscribe, like this video if you did. Love you, see you on the next video.